I may look like an ordinary human being, but I have a superpower. And like all superheroes, I have an origin story. One that began with a power that I didn't understand at first, and that I was told was a problem. But with the timely advice of mentors, through team-ups with allies, and after lots of training, I learned to control my powers and use them for good. Let me tell you my origin story. I was a precocious kid. I started reading at 3. I was reading at a university level by grade 3. My school did its best to mold me into the standardized norm, but I didn't fit in. I asked too many of the wrong sorts of questions at the wrong time. I daydreamed, which they told me meant that I didn't care. I was too curious. I was the kid who was going to stick something in the electric socket just to see what happened. When teachers cited their authority as the reason I should listen to them, rather than explaining why I should listen to them, I would get oppositional. They got fed up that I never remembered assignments, when the exams were. I would often hear, "Seth, if you would just apply yourself." There were a few exceptions, like Mrs. Glassman in grade 5, who saw that books were my sanctuary. She would bring me classic works of literature from her own home library and let me spend hours reading. Mostly, though, I experienced rigidity and unkindnesses from both teachers and students. I internalized all the negative messages. I decided adults didn't know what they were talking about when they told me I had potential, but that I was lazy. I had tried and failed, so probably I wasn't really all that capable. And then I really did give up. By grade 7, I had built up a lot of anger, and I got in a lot of fights with kids at recess. That didn't make me feel any better, though. By grade 8, I realized that being funny was usually a better strategy. And so I generated a lot of chaos. I also spent a lot of time in the principal's office. In high school, with new teachers and students, I met one of my first grade allies, by which I mean a friend who appreciates your strengths and accepts your weaknesses. His name was also Seth. I still had a lot of anger, but Seth, who was shy and calm, helped me regulate my emotions. When I first got called to my new principal's office, it wasn't for bad behavior, but for once again failing to hand in assignments, prepare for exams, or generally pay attention. The principal, a no-nonsense guy named Hirsch Jacobson, who I'd always been a little afraid of, wanted to know why I was slacking off. But while Hirsch was no nonsense, he was also extremely kind. He eventually became one of my most important early mentors. Anyone who wants to master their powers needs mentors to support them in their journey. The X-Men needed Dr. X. Batman needed Alfred. I don't know what I said during that conversation, but after a long meeting, Hirsch sent me to get evaluated. The results were a diagnosis of ADHDI, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, inattentive. A quick primer. The combined parts of our brain that carry out goal-directed behavior are called executive functioning. It's what helps us to plan, focus attention, remember, and juggle multiple tasks. An analogy I like is to think of executive function as a bit like a tour guide, responsible for planning and organizing our day out in the city that we're visiting. Each of our executive functions works differently, our tour guides, making the whole world neurodiverse. The majority have functions within a similar range. Scientists call this neurotypical. Brains that function at further ends of the continuums, affecting how one processes and responds to stimuli, are called neurodivergent. ADHD is one kind of neurodivergence, about 2.5 to 3% of the population. We perceive other people, time, and risks differently, and our memories work differently. There's also a tendency to high emotionality and impulsivity. Back when humans were hunter-gatherers, individuals with ADHD played an important role in the group. They were the risk takers. They led migrations. They spotted dangers. They located new food sources. Have you ever looked at a berry or a mushroom and wondered, who was the first person to try that to see if it was poisonous? It was probably someone with ADHD. These adventurers were how we now know about those valuable treats. But the world has changed. The type of executive function / tour guide generally rewarded in a modern educational setting is a highly organized one with a detailed itinerary, maps, knows all the transportation routes, where the sites are and how to get tickets. The way I would describe my personal experience is that my tour guide was enticed down winding back alleys just to see where they went and stopped to read every plaque along the way. It meant I often got lost and missed the tour bus. To most people enculturated with modern norms, someone with ADHD can seem impulsive, less self-aware, and lacking in attention. There are some experts who estimate that students with ADHD experience an average of 18 more negative messages a day than neurotypical students. That's 3,200 more a year. That's 20,000 more negative messages by age 10. Hearing, wake up, snap out of it, tune in, pay attention, what a space cadet, can really chip away at your self-confidence. That's what had happened to me. But the world has changed. I had to figure out how to live in it. So after my diagnosis, our school learning support helped me build up a toolbox of organizational strategies that I could use to succeed in school. By grade 11, I was largely able to cope on my own. And I had a name for this thing that happened to me when I was into something, like books or drawing, and the world and time would melt away, and my brain would wander for hours down those back alleys, not noticing time passing. Hyperfocus. Actually, attention deficit is a bit of a misleading name. I did not have a deficit of attention. I had too much of it. It just went where it wanted. Soon after high school, there were some personal tragedies in my life, including the deaths of both Seth and Hirsch. And in my grief, and without the support of those mentors and allies I had relied on, there was a lot of risky behavior, and I was lucky to avoid some bad outcomes. This is a fairly typical beat in the hero's journey. It's also when mentors and allies become most critical. When the Avengers faced their greatest foes, that is when they needed to come together to save the day. It was my allies, the most critical one being my wife, who is an umbrella of neurodivergence unto herself, who got me back on track. Allies help you climb out of the dark places. When I went back to get an MA in teaching at 28, I had an almost perfect GPA, which was new for me. I slowly realized I was actually applying my hyperfocus, my super attention, with intention. I later learned that the feeling of flow, where you're completely absorbed in a task, is not easy for most people to get into. For me, it had become easy. When someone with ADHD is interested in something, they can gain amazing expertise and skills. I have gone even farther, and after years of training, I have learned to turn on my hyperfocus at will like a laser beam. After I graduated, I wanted to be the kind of teacher that I had had all too infrequently and affect change. I made a lot of mistakes in how I went about things. I realized I had to work on myself first. I had to give up the facade of being neurotypical. I had to accept that I'm still terrible at organizing and prioritizing, that I lose track of time, and that when I question basic assumptions or share some of my more out there perspectives, it can make people feel uncomfortable. I worked hard on not saying everything that popped into my head, and I got comfortable with asking people to be allies so I could get support when I needed. Intriguingly, when I did that, then others became comfortable with asking me to help them with their projects and goals. And once they can see what I can do with my hyper-focus, all my divergent thinking becomes more attractive too. That's when I can really begin to use my powers to help people. If you are neurodivergent, when you encounter messages that you have to fix yourself or act normal, ignore them. Personally, I reject the notion that I have a deficit, dysfunction, or disorder. I have an executive function difference. Like almost everything else, there are benefits and drawbacks. All of us need to figure out how we fit into this world with our strengths and our weaknesses. Once I accepted that I am never going to become normal, I could embrace who I am and figure out how something I was told was a problem was actually a power. Find your mentors, find your allies, and take the time to figure out what works for you and where your powers lie. Your differences are a beautiful opportunity. To all my other neurodiverse planetary traveling companions, I hope that you can open your heart. A lot of neurodivergent folks have social anxieties that have come from our painful experiences. Can you think of anyone neurodivergent who may be alone? Usually alone. When someone does not, cannot fit in, there's probably a lot of hurt there too. A lot of people are afraid to be an ally of someone different because their brain is screaming at them to fit in. And they're worried that someone else's divergence will somehow rub off on them and mark them so that they become similarly outcast. Please, embrace kindness. Second, educate yourself. Find out about your neurodivergent friends, what they're going through, and how you can support them so that you avoid forever damaging someone's sense of self. Finally, open your mind. You want some neurodivergence in your life. These are brains unbound by boxes who enjoy imagining ways to fit a round peg in a square hole. Make the effort to befriend someone neurodivergent, and you may find yourself with an ally with a fascinating mind who will want to share their powers with you. Let's all be heroes together. Thank you.